Welcome to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek, where we give our audience a look into the world of manufacturing with a focus on the modern technology trends that we commonly call Industry 4.0. Our guests share their thoughts on the subject and their experience around what works and what doesn't, and share some tips on how to help you lead a successful digital transformation. My name is Sam Russum. I'm the Senior Director of Smart Manufacturing Solutions at Grantek, and today I am joined by James Burnand of 4IR Solutions. James is a 20-plus year veteran in industrial automation and has now turned his focus towards providing infrastructure for manufacturers to help them realize the benefits of the cloud for their plant floor operations. So weaving cybersecurity, operational requirements, and management into 4IR's offerings and providing education and consulting for companies looking to begin their journey into cloud-enabled, highly automated OT infrastructure. 4IR Solutions is a leading provider of cloud-based platform solutions and is a proud Grantek partner as well. So, James, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Sam. That was quite a mouthful there. You described it better than I think I'm capable of. So, thank you.
I didn't make that up. You provided it to me, so you're very capable of it, whether you realize it or not.
I'm not sure I personally wrote that, but I will take credit for it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're going to count it then. So James, you and I have known each other for as long as I've been in the industry, honestly. You and I think, know a lot about kind of Industry 4.0 and the technology around it. But to catch everybody else up, what are kind of your opinions on what is Industry 4.0, what makes it work, and kind of what do people need to pay attention to in the space?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think Industry 4.0 has been a bit of a misunderstood term, and I think it's worth maybe talking about what is Industry 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0 first, and then describing what Industry 4.0 is supposed to be. So Industry 1.0 was mechanization. So if you think about water wheels and you think about common shafts in manufacturing facilities, it's the reason why there was a lot of factories located along riverbanks for transportation and for layout and power. There was some constraints to that. And really, when you look at Industry 2.0, which was electrification, and Heinz being one of the very first facilities to do that, it allowed you to use electrical machines, which meant you could lay things out in a way that made more sense for the production and the material flow, as well as you didn't have to have necessarily locations that were constrained by your source of energy. You move forward another 50 years or so and go to Industry 3.0, maybe 60 years, which was automation. So taking, earlier on computer technologies, PLCs and servo drives, and replacing relays and replacing complex electrical systems with, much simpler and more flexible controllable systems. And I go back to my early career when I first started working in the industry, and one of the guys who was a founder and an original programmable controller guy showed me a big block of wires and said, yeah, this is the first programmable controller I ever used. And, first of all, you had to have it fabricated. So you built your program, sent it away for fab, it came back. And then if there was any changes you needed to make, you had to get out the soldering iron and you had to wire jumpers between things. And, we've come a long way since then. And if you think about automation, as a revolution, it absolutely is. It's changed the way manufacturing is done. It's increased the speed, decreased the cost, made it easier for folks to scale up. And really, that's the promise of digitalization as well, is, the things that have become common in our daily lives, the use of the internet and digital technologies and advanced planning systems and AI. These are all things that have use cases in manufacturing. And really, Industry 4.0 is all about how the heck can we make all this stuff work? I worry that it's been a little bit weaponized in marketing these days. The are you Industry 4.0 yet is unfortunately something that I think, I see folks struggling to understand what that means. But if you think about it purely in terms of what can provide value, what can change the way you do business, and how can you apply, intelligent use of technology to your manufacturing systems, the Industry 4.0 is and will be a revolution for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. I particularly like how you talk about, I'm also with you in that industry 3.0 versus 4.0. Like, where is that line? Is there a line? Like, how do you draw it? And I think a lot of that too is that, when you think about industry 3.0, a lot of that was applying computerization to automation, right? And manufacturing. But the jump from even like personal computers, what was purely computing, to what is today a supercomputer in our pockets with screens and interactions, and that goes out to the internet and comes back and things like that. Is that just an extension of a computer and what that's become today, or is it its own new thing with the internet and all that, right? So the same question that we would have around is what's the level of revolution between your old compact desktop tower and or the ENIAC, and your modern day cell phone applies just as much to Industry 4.0, right?
Yeah, I think if you think about it from a standardization of technology, I think that plays a big piece of it as well. Is you talk about, hey, my supercomputer in my pocket. Well, obviously computing power has gone up quite a bit, but it's also, I remember MNN files and data highway and half slot addressing and all the complication that you used to have to go through to make something talk to something else, and all of the all of the intricacies in engineering to make technologies that were never really intended to be interoperable. And when you look at, some of the standards that have been developed, some of the communication methods and how open architectures have really kind of become prevalent inside of the industry, all that stuff's a lot easier to do now. And with, the prevalence of high-speed internet, 5G coming in to be a big thing, the ability to have connected systems is absolutely easy by the standard of 15 or 20 years ago.
Totally. And you're right. And so let's assume that argument is done. Yes, we are in an industry 4.0. Yes, all of this new connectivity and the way that we can kind of do, actually similar to the way that you talked about being able to use offsite power in one of the earlier industrial revolutions. Now we're using offsite compute, right? And 4IR is really kind of, I think, at the leading edge of that, because you guys are all driving ways that we can be using the internet, using the cloud to make manufacturing operations more efficient. So tell me more about like 4IR and specifically what you guys are doing and how you fit into that industry 4.0 picture.
Yeah. So, the genesis of 4IR, I think, was really having gone through what I'll call the virtualization revolution, because we can't have enough revolutions. Where early on days, I recall dealing with customers and having bare metal servers, and server dies, image doesn't work on the next version, and really there being a grassroots push for the use of virtualization from integration companies. And I know I was one of the people out behind pushing as hard as I could, because it made it more flexible, it made it easier, it made it faster to deploy, it made it more portable. It was just a really good technology for the time. At that point, though, there was really no support from the vendors. So we had vendors that we would call up for support, and they'd ask if it was installed in the virtual machine, and then say, no, you have to install it on bare metal before we'll talk to you. But also, there was really no push or pull really from the corporate side to do anything about it. So it became this 10, 12, 15-year journey before it became the de facto way everything was done. And that's the de facto way things are done in factories today. What's different now, and what's different about cloud, is that there is a noted desire from the corporate entities for industrial data. It's a part of the business. It's a part of the modeling and part of the value. And there's a huge amount of opportunity in that information, especially when you connect it with marketing data, when you connect it with finance data and other supply chain data. There's a ton of value in there. And unfortunately, the systems weren't really designed to provide contextual information in an easy to consume format. So number one is all that data processing and all that those inferences and analyses that are being done are typically being done in the cloud, because most major organizations had switched to a cloud first strategy years ago. And so they're coming to the plant floor going, okay, where is it? How do I get it? And what we're seeing is a lot of point solutions coming in. So, folks going, yeah, we can put this device in and we'll just ingest this piece of information we need for your ammonia system, or this piece of information we need to, optimize your HVAC. And unfortunately, it doesn't solve what the manufacturer's problem is, which is, how can I intelligently provide the data? How can I sensibly take the parts of the cloud that are of value and are smart for me to use, be able to provide this data, but also, unload some of the things inside of my factory that are just difficult for me to manage. So things like backups, that's a super low hanging fruit. Taking tape drives down to the bank vault shouldn't really be a thing we do anymore, but it happens. There's a million different examples, but conceptually, being able to carve out what makes the most sense from an operational perspective and be able to, reduce the amount of labor that I need and be able to reduce the complexity of what I'm operating inside of my factory while still getting world-class features and data that can be ingested and processed and provide me insights and feedback as to how to improve my business. All of that is a function of the cloud.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And I might ask for like a specific. So I think that intuitively we all understand, like, yes, the idea of being able to interoperate all of that data is valuable. And what I have for my supply chain, plus my customer orders, plus my quality feedback, plus my manufacturing data, it seems like a lot of these can solve a lot of problems. Do you have any examples of times that you have seen manufacturers kind of take all of that data and a common source in the cloud and use that to really improve their business?
It's actually a very challenging question because there's a lot of folks who I would say the biggest use case that I've seen so far has been for predictive maintenance. Predictive maintenance really, unfortunately, doesn't fit that story you just described, which is tying together all sorts of other useful information from other places. It's really looking at specifically the hardware and the machinery that's operating and using models to make determinations for failure mode. So that's probably the biggest use case we've seen so far. The holy grail of applying deep learning to a massive data set and coming up with all sorts of inferences that humans can't. That I haven't seen yet. I've seen lots of people try, but it's. I think it's kind of the holy grail, but I think there's a longer journey we need to go on around, just optimization first and providing information first, and then using the power of computing to figure out, over time what to do with it.
Yeah, well, and I actually really appreciate that answer too, right? Because kind of going back to what you were saying around, is Industry 4.0 getting over marketed kind of more than what it actually is and what it can actually deliver, right? And I do think we hear there's a lot of stuff, and it's hard to see what's out there around like what is an idea of what we can actually do with industry. So sorry, what's an idea of what we can do with Industry 4.0 versus what is kind of a actual use case that has been done, and we have actual cases behind it, and we've done it 7 times, and now you're going to do it, the 8th, versus this is theoretically something we could do. I sure hope someone calls me about it,
Practical, pragmatic problem solving has always been kind of my modus operandi, and unfortunately, it's a lot of the bill of goods that's being sold to manufacturers is impractical. So here's an example of something practical that we've tried to solve. It's really hard to keep your plant floor systems up to date, operating systems, patches, just making sure that when some security issue comes up or there's some sort of an update to software that needs to happen, it's difficult to do that because you have to run it through a risk-based process to analyze what do I have to do, what sort of changes does it mean to the application, what sort of downtime might I have, how am I going to test this without actually disrupting production, what do I do if something fails, how do I roll it back? So, really, if you look at what 4IR, one of the primary things we're trying to solve for is we know that's a hard problem. And by standardizing the way that you deploy, in this case, these applications, or Ignition and is kind of the first one we have, we handle that for the end users. So they don't have to have the labor or the skill to be able to understand how to do that because we provide that as a function. And unfortunately, it's, a lot of folks don't realize how big of a problem that is until they get hit with ransomware or until they have, a major security issue. But unfortunately, it happens a lot more often these days than it used to because, ransomware, the biggest target for ransomware right now is manufacturing. 28% of all ransomware attacks.
I didn't know that, actually. That's a cool stat. But like what you're saying totally resonates with me. Like I've seen this too, right? I've done I think that people, especially if you're not like as familiar with manufacturing and the way that works, there is a big resistance a lot of times to actually keeping your systems up to date with the latest patches and everything, right? Everything is seen as a change that could interrupt your production. And the second you stop producing, you stop making money, right? But you're right. There is all of this proactive stuff from security to getting the latest bugs fixed and things like that are really important. Even from like a licensing and support standpoint, I've seen people go out of their support contracts on some of this update maintenance software, and it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get back into compliance with that, right?
Yep.
So I'm totally with you. It's funny. It's not the use case that people see on the internet and they're like, oh my gosh, what an excellent application of Industry 4.0. I can't wait to have all of my systems up to date and patched properly. But it's really important.
Well, and like you know, when you describe it as patched properly and up to date to the moment, that's actually not even the problem. Like most systems that are compromised, you know, they're not behind like by a month, they're behind by years. I mean, when NotPetya ran through and knocked out so many major organizations a few years back, there was a patch available for that over a year before it ran through those organizations. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when it comes to the risk-based process that you follow, I highly encourage everyone to invest time and energy in this, because I think it's hugely important. But we also recognize that the skill sets and the people, which I was actually a little surprised, because I watched the keynote for the Aviva conference and for the automation fair last week, and both kind of said the same thing, that, you know, labor is actually one of the biggest barriers to Industry 4.0 right now in digitalization. And you know, it surprised me, because I feel like the enablement of people and the drive of you know what digitalization promises makes lives easier. And is it purely just a labor shortage, not enough heads going around, or is there something else around skill that's missing inside of manufacturers today that, you know, is a long-term and a bigger problem? I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, but let's see how you might be able to help a little bit, because it's actually come up a couple of times this season, and I do think that just labor is kind of hot on everyone's minds these days. But so we might not have all the solutions for how to train this new labor force, but at least we can kind of give an idea of where the market might be by the time that team is trained. So like, again, like, it doesn't make sense to train everybody for what we're doing right now. By the time they learn it, they're all going to be too late. So if you look forward 3, 4, 5 years into the future, what other technologies in that Industry 4.0 domain are you seeing really pick up, that if you were going to get some people some training, this is what I'd kind of have them focus on today?
Yeah. So from an operational perspective, like factory floor workers, they need to be, you know, mobile friendly. They need to understand databases. They need to understand reporting. They need to understand how to manipulate and relate data and use that information to make decisions. Some of that comes into the tools that they use, but fundamentally, you know, the concept of continuous improvement and you know, data, it matters there. From a practitioner perspective, you know, a systems integration or technical resources, the use of orchestration, I think, is something that's going to become really, really important. So if you think about, you know, switching from the concept of virtual machines to containerized applications or serverless applications, these are cloud native and cloud friendly technologies. And once you convert your applications to work in this way, you can use orchestration to deploy, manage, and heal when something goes wrong with these systems, so that the burden of management gets less and less on your IT systems. It's also a totally different way to do development. It's a totally different way to think about how things are built. And honestly, we're waiting right now. There's not a ton of industrial software vendors who really offer, you know, Docker container based versions of their software that are fully supported. That's the biggest reason, you know, and Inductive is ahead of the game in that regard. And certainly we've hitched our wagon there, because we feel confident that they've got a really strong solution and a roadmap that, you know, really improves on some of the opportunities that still exist in the platform and makes it into a really compelling on-prem and in-cloud option.
Yeah, good. Could you maybe, I'm curious. So I feel like a lot of people, myself included, honestly, are probably more familiar with kind of that virtualization background, right? If you're still like mostly experted in metal servers and things like that, there's probably a pretty big catch up to do there. But if you're kind of more from that VM era, can you kind of describe to me like what containers are and how they provide value kind of in that manufacturing industrial space?
Yeah, it's so a virtual machine, and I'll do the best definition I can without looking up cheat notes here. So a virtual machine really duplicates all of the parts of a computer and software. So the RAM, the CPU, and a full operating system. Now, you don't actually need a full operating system to operate most applications. So in a containerized environment, what you're doing is you're actually minimizing the amount of custom operating system that you install to be just what's required to run an application. So if you think about, olden days, if I was going to set up a web server, I would have, PHP installed and I put MySQL on the box and maybe Apache for my server. And I have a bunch of different things all living on a server that are providing that function for me. But I also have, because it's a build of Linux or a build of Windows, I also have a bunch of other stuff on there. So, command line stuff and, different functions of the shell, maybe some file sharing stuff that isn't explicitly necessary to run those applications.
Solitaire.
Well, yeah. So, and you think about it from a security perspective, is now I've got multiple applications running on there. I have multiple services available. I have a bunch of services on that I don't really need to make this happen. And so what you've done is you've made a more complex virtual machine to do this function than it needs to be. And you've created a surface area for attack that's larger than it needs to be. So with a container, what you're doing is the operating system is absolutely minimal for what's required for operating that function. So in the case of the same server you set up with containers, there would be a container for the PHP, there'd be a container for the Apache, there'd be a container for the MySQL database. They would all communicate to each other over the network and kind of back and forth. They'd all have their own security set up, but there's no extra services on it. And one of the things that happens with containers when they're designed correctly is that they're configured with files, so that if something goes wrong with the container, and this is what orchestration adds to the party, is if something goes wrong with a container, you throw it away and put a new one in place and reload the configuration to it. So what you end up having is a digitally signed container that can't possibly be changed. And it operates using an orchestration engine, which makes sure that it's running all the way it's supposed to at all times. And you've minimized the amount of surface area for attack that you have, because you're only running what's absolutely necessary to run that particular application.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And is this just the next? I remember it being like such a lift, and like a lot of new concepts getting introduced as virtualization came along, right? This just seems like a natural evolution of what we've seen before, just of kind of breaking things into more modular pieces. And yeah, there's a new lexicon that comes along with it, but like everything you said makes a lot of sense. They're just smaller building blocks that you're kind of managing more tightly and being able to deploy those programmatically. Makes a lot of sense. Cool.
Yeah, and you think about deploying programmatically, there's some folks out there who are now running controllers as Docker containers.
I've seen that. Yeah.
So when you think about kind of the hardware you need to run to run a DCS or run a PLC, there's now new options out there that potentially you can use orchestration to operate those controllers, which is pretty wild. But I mean, the future is that I think we're gonna have more and more of that stuff move to that kind of an architecture, and it's going to create. It's going to make things a lot more scalable, a lot more flexible, and a lot more secure.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks for going into that deep with me, James. I know I think a lot of people probably do have questions about it. A lot of them probably heard containers, heard Docker, but I think we're still getting more people educated about it. So thanks for kind of going into that with me. To kind of shift a little bit and start to close out. So I think that one of the things we do on this podcast is we ask guests to give questions for future guests. And I have one for you up here too. So this one's kind of around change management. People were asking around how do you suggest solving the change management problem that is attached to Industry 4.0 projects, from people, technology, process? There's just so much change to manage. Do you have any recommendations for how people start to approach that?
Oh, that's a super difficult challenge because it's so multifaceted, right? It's that combination of people, process, and technologies that are all required, and everyone requires attention. I think the concept of a center of excellence, which is multidisciplinary and has, the ability to make and execute decisions, is absolutely necessary for your digitalization goals to be able to move forward. Mm-hmm. They've got to be connected to their parts of the organization, whether it's quality or operations or IT, but they've also got to be empowered to actually make and push decisions forward. It's such a wide and big problem because it's everything from, operator training to, the way we go about procuring hardware, to the way we go about, implementing change in facilities and who owns the P&L. And it's going to be a little bit different for every company, but that's why you need that multidisciplinary team to really be responsible for doing that, or else, they'll constantly just run into brick walls and, eventually give up.
Yeah, for sure. You're making me think about it, and I can't think of many Industry 4.0 digital transformation journeys I've seen be successful without a center of excellence. It doesn't mean that everybody who has a center of excellence is successful, but those who have been successful usually have that team of champions that is really driving things forward. That is really their goal. They're kind of focused on it every day. Yeah. So good tip for sure. And you're right. It's such a big area of change management that it kind of shows that's just one of many things that you need kind of this dedicated team for. So yeah, great answer. And then anything that you kind of want me to ask for our next guest, what do you want to know about Industry 4.0, James?
Oh boy, this is this is an interesting one. I guess I would kind of lean back again on the cloud part of this is, and really my question is for, I don't know who your next person is going to be, and I apologize if they're not plant floor centric, but
we'll take it to someone else then. Don't worry about it. We got plenty of this. Yeah.
I am curious how important edge is as a part of these architectures.
Ooh.
Because I'm trying to figure out what is the magical formula that will push and drive Industry 4.0 for manufacturers. Edge is obviously a part of this architecture. It's maybe a stepping stone on the road, but I'm curious kind of what everyone thinks and where everyone's at in their mindset around edge.
Cool. Yeah, that's I'm curious myself. I'll be happy to ask that one for you.
Cool.
Well, hey, thanks, James. This is a really great conversation. I really appreciate you being able to join us on the podcast. Is there anything else kind of in general that's going on with 4IR Solutions that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, we got some exciting stuff coming up. So it may have already been announced by the time this recording hits the mainstream, but we're working with Inductive Automation on the designation of solutions partner. We're really excited. We've been working in concert with them for a long time, and this just solidifies our position with them. And we're hoping to see folks at ARC this year. We're going to be presenting with Cameco as a part of our sustainability discussions. So we're excited to meet more folks.
Awesome. And congratulations, hopefully, on the Inductive Solutions Partner agreement. That's really, really great. So cool. Well, hey, thank you, James. Really appreciate you being on today. And thank you, everybody, for listening in today. Remember, we would love to hear from you. So do please follow Grantek on LinkedIn to stay up to date with everything that we're doing. Subscribe to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek on any of those services where you get your podcast today. And you can always email any questions, feedback to info@grantek.com. And please do join us next time on the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. Thanks again, James. Great conversation.
Thanks, Sam. See ya.
Welcome to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek, where we take a look into the world of manufacturing with a focus on stories and trends that lead to better solutions. Our guests share tips and outcomes that are going to help improve your productivity. My name is Sam Russell, and I'll be your host. Today, I'm joined by Michael Rissy of Seeq Advanced Analytics. Seeq's applications enable users to rapidly investigate and share insights from the time series data generated by manufacturing and IoT solutions. The result is faster decisions, the ability to drive continuous improvement in production KPIs, and increase profitability. So, Michael, thanks a lot for being able to join me on the podcast. Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Michael Rissy, Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Seeq, one of the founding partners back in 2013 when there were 10 of us around a picnic table. There's now over 200 spread across the United States, Europe, and into Asia. So quite a bit of growth over the last almost 9 years.
Yeah, that's great. It's really been fantastic working with Seeq and kind of seeing you guys grow over time. It's been a lot of fun. So let's kind of get this started like we always do with the broad but interesting question. What does Industry 4.0 mean to you?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
To me, you look at anything and you think about the balance between value and cost. Okay, that would be valuable to me, but what does it cost? And what Industry 4.0 to me says is, okay, throw all your cost expectations out the window because everything's going to get a lot cheaper. Data creation is going to get cheaper. Data storage going to get cheaper. The ability to calculate is going to get cheaper. The ability to distribute insights is going to get cheaper. So what might have been valuable but was too expensive, you really need to rethink the expense part of that or the cost part of that, because the wave of innovations is just driving down costs, and that's going to make for a different, outcome when it comes to, well, is it worth me doing this from a value perspective? So what you wouldn't have done before, you might now do, and that whole change in attitude about the cost of something is, I think, a key driver in the Industry 4.0 discussion.
Yeah, good point. And actually, it really makes me think of those like adoption curves that you see about like new technology adoption all the time, right? It sounds like part of what you're saying is that some of those early adopters have done that trial by fire and kind of figured out some things that work and some things that don't and driven down some cost. And now it's the time where bigger parts of the industry can start to adopt some of this technology too.
Right. Well, the key thing is that on that adoption piece that I come back to a lot in customer conversations is how do you adopt it in the context that you have, right? It's one thing to say, hey, we're going to adopt something. Oh, and you need to go hire new people first. And another thing, we need to adopt something and oops, we need to turn all of our assets 90 degrees to the left, something ridiculous. And we want to do this, but the cost or the impact of adoption is high. So the question about adoption is, how does it work with you where you are, your current employees, your current deployments, your current production schedules and requirements, how to tap digital innovation in the context of what's already there. That's the key question about the adoption piece. And obviously, very different conversation for greenfield, where you can plan for it from the get-go. But when there aren't any new oil refineries in the world in the last however many years, as an example. So that's the exception. The rule is make it work in where you are with who you've got. Solve that, and you can start tapping the cost benefits.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I that's something I see a lot too, where I think that, there may be some need to add in some data scientists or some capabilities that you don't have today, but that's not the problem that you tackle first, right? You have to meet people where they're at. You have to see where it's going to provide immediate value to the business, and that's going to justify those future cooler things that we can be doing, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay, so what is your least favorite Industry 4.0 buzzword that's out there? And I only said one, so yeah, be selective.
That's not fair. We do virtual user groups with our customers in different industries. So we've done chemical user groups and oil and gas, virtual because of COVID, obviously, but virtual user groups for chemical customers, food and beverage customers, pharmaceutical customers, oil and gas customers. And one of the things in the intro is we always give them a list of buzzwords and ask them that question: what is their favorite buzzword? So it's very that's always a popular part of the discussion. I don't know that I've got one least. Maybe it's artificial intelligence, just because when you scratch the surface, you end up in machine learning very quickly. And when you scratch machine learning, you end up often, not always, but in regression. The ability to, the biggest gap between sort of what you're actually using and then what the word is, to me, is artificial intelligence. And the idea that you would do that in a plant environment, rather than trusting in the expertise, the experience of the employees, how you would augment their work rather than replace their brains. That's probably my least favorite of the words that are out there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. Actually, I don't know if I'd call it out my least. I would have to really think about that question too, I guess. But you're right. It's one of those things where, like, at its purest definition of just like computer systems emulating some type of more human intelligence, like, at a very basic level, that could be a couple of formulas in Excel, right? But we're kind of trained to think about it as something that controls a humanoid robot that is coming to attack me in a Will Smith movie, right? So,
no, and the other point is that time and again, what we find in working with machine learning, with Seeq, with customers, is it's the imagination of the users. And what do I mean by that? I just said expertise and experience. The imagination, where they're wondering and they're thinking about, and they're saying, oh, maybe it's this that's causing that. Oh, maybe it's this. And typically, you can't do an analysis on the data that you don't have. And so typically that innovation and that imagination is about, oh, let's get this other data set, put this into the mix and see if that has an impact and outcome. That expertise scientifically or imagination creatively, that so often is what leads to the discovery, right? If it could be coded and said, well, this is the outcome, or this is what you were looking for, well, that's great, but that's not typically what we see. It's the expertise, the experience, and the questioning that leads to, oh, we found what we were looking for, right? We avoided $23 million in downtime of a plant. We saved millions of dollars a year in this raw material or energy cost and savings. The tapping, enabling, accelerating the expertise and the experience of those employees. That, rather than magic boxes, is where we see this working.
You're right. The idea of applying something like artificial intelligence to what you described, human creativity, right? That sounds like a very heavy lift, right? And sometimes you just got to lean on that human creativity and the people that you have, right? They so often, look, they know their expertise and experience. They know what they're looking for. It's just too hard to find, or it takes too much time to get there. Or in the past, the cost in time or money just didn't justify the effort, right? An example of that would be what customer we're working with. They had a 400-hour project in Excel, 400 hours among multiple employees. Was that 400-hour effort would have to have an outcome, right? That was really worth their time and energy. Okay, same thing less in Seeq was measured in minutes. Right, that's the kind of advantage we provide with advanced analytics on time series data specific to task versus the way things have been done in the industry broadly around for the last 30 years. Well, that radically changes what is this going to be valuable to do? Because instead of 400 hours, it's 53 minutes. Okay, that might be worth doing. We could take that and then go put it into effect. And again, customers typically, frequently, usually always, when they're talking about the benefits they're experiencing with Seeq, start out at $1 million. $1 million in saving, $1 million in more uptime, $1 million in higher quality product and output, $1 million in asset availability, and so forth. So those hours and minutes, if they can spend them effectively, can really have a big downstream effect. Great. So you ran right into my next question there, which is, so if we have all these, so you mentioned a couple of things that customers are looking to solve with software like Seeq and Industry 4.0, right? It could be saving people time. It could be reducing unplanned downtime. Is there a single problem or a couple of problems that you want to add on to that customers are frequently looking to solve with Industry 4.0 technology or advanced analytics technology like Seeq specifically?
I think the basic big theme is, what's next in better? What's next in better? There was a wave of better that had to do with Six Sigma or Lean or the Black Belt and Six Sigma efforts. The what's next for continuous improvement? What's next for the next level of better? Whether it's production outcomes better, quality better, energy efficiency better, environmental compliance better, sustainability better. What's the tool that's going to be used to enable and accomplish the next level of better for those plant results and KPIs? So that can take a lot of different directions in a lot of different industries and a lot of different use cases, whether it's predictive about what's going to happen, or diagnostic root cause analysis about what did happen, or monitoring by exception for what's going on out there and what should I care about. I have hundreds of thousands of assets. Tell me the 3 I care about most right now. So it's what's better, what's the next step in better, and then what in my industry and what matters to me as an organization. And that goes all over the place. I mean, the use cases we have, hundreds and hundreds of use cases across industries and in different scenarios. And there's no straight one answer on that one.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. And then as we look at that too, like over the next 5 years, can you think of anything like in this consumer technology space that you see kind of being adopted more by manufacturers over the next amount of time to kind of start to enable some of those solutions?
Well, I think it's less than a consumer technology specifically than it is a consumer model. And the consumer model is that stuff works together, and because consumers demand that stuff works together. And in the industrial manufacturing world, stuff that works together is so specialized they give it a name, which is COTS, which is commercial off the shelf. Oh my goodness, stuff works together. It's commercial off the shelf, as opposed to when's the last time you bought, well, probably the Apple stack would be an example, but a highly proprietary, only works my other things model. So I think it's more the consumer expectation of integration and things working together than a particular technology. And one thing that's certainly going to drive that is cloud, right? The cloud model of co-opetition, and things need to work together, and the customer expects this to work, and so we're going to have to make it work. That model of integration and interactivity between different vendors is definitely going to be accelerated with a push from the cloud, more data on the cloud, more work on the cloud, some manufacturing applications on the cloud, MES, not DCS, but probably MES and things like that. So it's the consumer model of co-opetition and things working together more than a consumer technology, if you will. That's going to change.
Yeah, sure. And actually, we were talking about this just the other day around how, especially as we are looking at cloud and we're looking at kind of some of those consumer technologies, right? I think more of subscriptions and software as a service, right? Which I know is some options for Seeq as well. And how we were actually talking about just kind of like the implications around that for cybersecurity, right? And how many times do you walk into a plant where they haven't upgraded the SCADA system in the last decade and it's running on a outdated version of Windows and things like that? So while a lot of manufacturers might be a little bit worried about this idea of kind of software as a service, the trade-off that you might be making for security and the regular updates and things like that you get by adopting cloud and things like that are enormous, and things that you don't even notice in a lot of the subscriptions that you pay in your day-to-day life. If your Netflix app gets updated or your phone gets a new OS, you just get it. You're always at the latest version, right?
Well, that's going to be an interesting set of conversations depending on the app. If you're talking DCS and SCADA, and that's going to be on-prem and locked down for as far as I can see is my expectation. But for other systems, definitely, and when you're above L3 in the Purdue stack, L4, 5 apps, those could benefit from the updating or the maybe more consumer model of the subscription and updating software. And we've come a long way from software being updated every 18 to 36 months, right? Those are the old chip cycles. And with Seeq, we're at quarterly updates, and we're leaning towards, in some cases, actually having some components update more often. So it's going to be different in terms of the opportunities for getting that innovation out and then experiencing that innovation to the customer than what it's been in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things we've been talking about here, right? So actually we're just mentioning how Seeq has those more frequent updates around how you guys are leveraging so much cloud technologies. What other things kind of differentiate Seeq as a platform, product, or a solution that you think is particularly of interest to manufacturers out there?
Well, I think, sorry, that's a little blunt, a little stuttery there, but
that's okay.
Key thing, ease of use. It's for the employees you have. If you can use Excel, you can use Seeq, right? There's some little training involved, and you can get going, but it's about, and where's your data? Your data is fine. If your data is in silos, or it's on the cloud, or it's on-prem, or it's on both, your data is fine. So that ability to install it in the morning and find $1 million of value in the afternoon, that's not an outlandish marketing claim. That is what can happen, because it's the people that you have with their expertise and experience. It's the data that you have where it currently exists. And then it's that ability to find a new set of insights, the next step of better, I mentioned before, that have a dramatic impact on outcomes. That is so important, because there's no preamble. There isn't a preamble. There isn't go hire these other people. There isn't go do this with all your data. There isn't, and again, it's ridiculous, and I apologize to your listeners in advance. Don't turn all your assets by 90 degrees, or whatever the ridiculous notion would be that you have to preamble something to start getting benefits. And once you have that working with the data where it is, with the employees that you have, and getting these advantages, there's also a future-proof aspect. So as the organization moves to the cloud, as new innovation comes in from your data science team or your IT organization, as other things happen, that can all extend or fit with the Seeq experience. And so it's that time to value on day one, and then it's okay, and we're safe with this over the years that follow.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Great. So I wanted to ask a question to you that came from one of our earlier podcasts. We always try to pay it forward a little bit. You'll get to ask a question to a future guest as well. So the last question that I had was around what is the impact of machine learning in your area of expertise? They actually said AI in there too, but based on our conversation, I'm going to skip that part.
What's that buzzword?
Yeah, right. So how have you really started to leverage elements of machine learning and seen that work in your experience in manufacturing?
Got it. So the starting point for machine learning with Seeq was simply using it as technology, which was enabling the features that Seeq users were using. So, they could do things in the application point and click experience where we're using machine learning either to power the features, or they're actually interacting with something like regression models in the tool. What we've done in the last 6 months, which I think is just super interesting, is recognize, okay, wait a minute. There's, 2-3 million apps on the Google or Apple app stores, 2 or 3 million apps on the Apple app stores. How many algorithms are going to be in the world that are going to be compelling or interesting or useful? Will there be millions? Will there be hundreds of thousands? Will it be tens? I don't know what the number is. What I am positive of is they won't all come from Seeq. That there will be an opportunity for innovation in machine learning to come from multiple places. And our model at Seeq is bring your own algorithm, right? If there's something we've done and we've got an open source site on GitHub with a set of algorithms, great, go use it. And you can plug it into Seeq Data Lab and work. If your IT department is using something like Azure Machine Learning to build interesting algorithms, you can tap that algorithm from the Seeq user experience so you can build your own. There are third parties building interesting algorithms. AWS has something called Lookout for Equipment. It's a predictive analytics algorithm, runs on data from that's collected in the cloud. Guess what? If you want to be in Seeq and take advantage of that algorithm from that third party that's building one of many examples, then you can do that. So our view on this is there's going to be a whole lot of algorithms in the world, and no one vendor, much less company, but no one vendor is going to be all of the algorithms you need or may want in your organization. So you can have your data science team building, do it. We'll plug those in. You can have third parties building them, like AWS. Then you can tap those as well. You could also use some of ours. You could also build your own as a process engineer, right? If you're comfortable with Python and want to start scripting things. So we just view this sort of like we view the Google Play or the App Store with Apple, which is there's going to be a lot of options from a lot of sources. And we won't be 100% of those. Our job instead is to enable you to access 100% of what's out there. And so that's where we are today in terms of we've had machine learning and building in our product and useful in our product. And now we've gone to a model of recognizing this constellation of algorithms that are available and will be available in the future, and enabling customers to tap those and the innovation they bring within the Seeq experience, so they don't have to go someplace else for it.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I mean, I could make an argument that my entire department at Grantek is kind of based on some principles like that, right? Where it's not enough anymore to just come with the right software and the right tool. You also need those accelerators to kind of get those into a customer and see value very quickly and be able to take kind of a lot of them, right? So what Seeq on its own is very great, but Seeq coming with all of these options for machine learning algorithms that you can be plugging into this and leveraging is even more powerful, especially if you already have a library for a specific use case or for a specific industry to get so you're not starting from scratch every time.
We'll go back to your question a minute ago about consumer technology. Mm-hmm. Well, this is not so much a consumer technology as a consumer mindset, which is, aftermarket products for the thing that I buy, whether it's, your car or your house and the new dishwasher or these other things. You assume an aftermarket opportunity to improve on some core asset or something that you acquire. This aftermarket attitude of customization, of specificness, of opportunity, that's what we're talking about, which is it's just being applied to machine learning algorithms rather than dishwashers or special hubcaps or something like that. It's, hey, that marketplace is going to exist to facilitate and accelerate my success.
There we go. There's our tagline for this episode. What machine learning and your dishwasher have in common.
That, by the way, is the first time I've used that. If any of your listeners want to take issue with it, then let me know.
No, I bought it.
It's what came to mind. It's what came to mind. I do think it is a consumerish attitude to say, hey, there's a marketplace of things out there, and those things should be able to work with my thing, and that should make me better off, right? From a perspective of working together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't care that thing I have is a 40-year-old production asset that hasn't been updated in that entire time, but I still want it to work. And there's ways to do it.
It's all, Scotch tape and ball bearings.
All right. So what do you want to set up for the next person I interview? What Industry 4.0 question do you have that you want to hear answered in a future podcast?
Well, so I think of Industry 4.0 in sort of these time segments. There was pre-COVID, and that's when a lot of the first wave of attention and language and enthusiasm come out. Then there was the COVID wave, which really, to me, COVID equals cloud in terms of the impact and acceleration. We're starting to see, we had our first event last week, IHS CERA Week, major oil and gas conference, starting to see the return of in-person events, starting to see the in-person travel, things like that. Mm-hmm. So, okay, what does Industry 4.0 version 3 look like post-COVID world? Where do we go? Where does it go? Does it sort of stay on this cloud on rails model? Does it morph somehow in terms of expectations with respect to remote employees and where people are, centers of excellence? I'm curious what Industry 4.0 version 3, I love that, Industry 4.0 version 3 looks like.
I mean, that would be Industry 4.3. We realize.
Yeah, we can do that too. That would be good. That your language of that. What does Industry 4.0.3 look like? Innovation post-COVID.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I hope we get someone good to answer that one. I'm sure we will.
And they have to use dishwashers in their response.
I hope so. Like, just for the continuity, that'd be great. This was obviously a lot of fun. Michael, thank you so much for joining me here on the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. I hope everybody listening enjoyed too. Really great insights. Is there anything that Seeq wants to promote? Anything that you all are up to in the near future that you want our audience to know about?
No, we'll be back out at conferences to the extent that we can be. We've got materials and webinars coming, and we're still rolling along. So just if we can help, you can find me at info@seeq.com, and we can go from there.
Okay, that sounds great. So thanks again to our listeners. And also remember, we would love to hear from you as well. So follow Grantek on LinkedIn to stay up to date with everything that we're doing. Subscribe to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek, wherever you get your podcasts. Email any questions, feedback, or your thoughts on Industry 4.0 to info@grantek.com. And join us next time on the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. Thanks again, Michael. Really great time.
Thank you, Sam. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.